Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the podcast. I am so glad that you're here. Now, very quick housekeeping right before you dive in. This is a little bit longer than usual. It's a slightly longer episode, so get comfortable, grab your favorite drink, or go for a walk or something. And I hope you enjoy the ride. It was such a joy to record. Now, you will notice at the end, it is slightly abruptly cut off, and that is because I got interrupted while I was doing the recording. So I decided to end it there because it was already longer than my usual episodes. So don't worry, there is another part coming in which I will nicely conclude everything. But I hope the journey so far that I take you on makes sense. And there is a point in there that I mentioned that I wasn't intentional with my manifesting and the journey, but what I meant was it wasn't fully conscious. I was doing it, but it was unconscious. It was very intentional, but it was unconscious. And there is a point all through where you may be hearing some background noise, which was some kids playing nearby, and I hope it's not too loud or too distracting from the story that I'm telling you, basically. But I think that's pretty much it, and now let's get ready to dive straight in. Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Optimistic Agenda podcast. My name is Mossam and I'm your host, and I am so grateful to you for tuning into this new episode. Now, I'm particularly excited for this one. I know. I think I say that for every episode, but genuinely, because this one has been a long time coming, and it's something that I've been sitting with. It's something that I get frequently asked a lot of the times, and it is something that I haven't publicly shared before, so it's just got me feeling all sorts of things and all sorts of ways, and it's something that I was sitting with for a while, just to see how much I wanted to share, what exactly I wanted to share, and because I always want to share from a space of this is my experience, but I'm sharing it because maybe you see a part of yourself in a part of my story and something resonates, or even if it's not something that you see, maybe something that I say is going to make something click for you. So I'm always just trying to come from that space of how can I share in a way that it's my story, but it's something that is helpful and beneficial to you. And I have just been, sitting and making sure that anything that I remember, I'm just been writing down so that I don't leave any important bits out. So we're going to see how long this goes for. And yeah, this is a question that I get asked all of the time, is how I got started on my coaching journey and how I got onto this path. And what I'm going to be talking about is the time that I had my spiritual awakening, because that was really a lot of the sort of starting point for a lot of the things, or the culmination of a lot of things. And we're going to see how this goes. And there's going to be a mix of the awakening. There's going to be how I got started on the coaching journey to where I am right now. And this is going to incorporate a little bit of my personal healing journey as well. So let's get going. I'm so excited. And this is going to, I have no idea how long it's going to be. So maybe just grab yourself a little drink, get cozy, and just be prepared to come on this ride and this journey with me as I relive it and talk to you about it. Yeah. And what I want to just start by is just a preface saying that this is my story, and some of the parts may sound absolutely out there for you, or something that may not resonate. Other things will resonate. So please take it as as whatever feels good for you, whatever resonates for you, and leave the rest, because I am just sharing my personal experience. So what I'm going to start with is just a backstory for context, which is how I got started in personal development. And like many people, I've always been a little kind of bookworm. I was always reading something or another. I couldn't fall asleep without reading, and it was like I almost always had a book with me. And initially, obviously, that was, I was reading a lot of fiction and stuff. And then one time I went into a bookstore with my dad, and I was just, I don't know, I was like really at this point as a teenager where I was desperate for some kind of change, some kind of reprieve from all of the stuff that I was going through. And I saw this book and I was like, I want this book. And I got it, but I don't think I started reading it immediately. It took me a while to pick it up and actually dive into it. And to this day, I have not yet fully finished reading that book, which I aim to do. But that got me started. And even the much that I read about, I think, half to 3/4 of it. And whatever I did read in it, is as soon as I was reading something, it was actually just, it was very easy to put into action. And I was just going out there and putting it, using it. And that was my initial sort of tippy toe, getting my, feet wet a little bit into the personal development world. And the other thing was The Secret movie. Like a lot of people, that's how I got started on my manifestation journey for the most part. And just a combination of those two were pretty powerful in terms of me beginning to create my change and starting to notice shifts and things happening, and a change and a shift in my identity as well, amongst so many other things. But that was the one thing. But now with The Secret was, I would try to manifest, but I would keep self-sabotaging. Does that sound familiar? Because it was kind of like I would do it and then some things happened. Other things, if they didn't happen within the timeline that I wanted, because I was just taking in tips and everything, from the movie and trying to put that into effect into my life. But somehow, somewhere, I would start self-sabotaging. I would start doubting it. I would start just not believing in it. And I would lose my faith and my belief in the whole thing. And I was like, oh, this is just a gimmick. And much of it was also attributed to people around me saying that, they're like, oh, these things just don't happen. These are not for people like us. Can you hear all of the stories? Like, it's just, this is probably for another episode, but I could keep going on about like how people perceive things and just the beliefs and the stories and everything that dictates all of that. So this story was like, it was all of it's fake and it's not true and it's not real. But I was like, but it's happened for me, it's happened in certain different aspects and areas of my life that I could actually tangibly see it. So what was the disconnect? I didn't know, because a lot of it was, now that I realize and I know it, and I'm deep into that world, I realized that a lot of it was very surface level. There was a few things that were missing and a few key pieces that kind of just were not there, that once I learned them just made everything click. And I would literally, anytime I wanted inspiration, anytime I was ever in feeling like a little slumpy or something, I would just go and spend hours and hours reading the Secret blog on their website, on The Secret's website, about people and their stories that they had submitted. And some of the stories were absolutely incredible. If you're at a point where I don't know if they still have them. I haven't actually gone and read that in quite a while. But if it is there, and if you're at a point where sometimes you just need something chugging, churning, happening, moving, you're looking for some inspiration, then I really do recommend just hopping onto their website of For the Secret and just going through a bunch of the stories. They have so many different topics and areas, and obviously you'd have to sift through them. There were some which were really good, others sounded a bit kind of made up, I don't know, but there were some which were written in like incredible detail and just put forward in that sort of genuine, authentic way. Like, it just felt like, oh my gosh, like, wow, if they can do it, I can do it, and I can make it work for me. And sometimes you'll just learn something different. So yeah, and that was my background. And I had other experiences, like I mentioned, I had different sort of things that had manifested. I'm trying to think if I have any specific examples. One of the main things, actually quite a few, the major thing was getting admission in the university that I wanted. I really, really wanted to go there, and it was some of the best times that I had. I made some of my best friends there that I'm still in touch with, and I just completely evolved into this different person. I went in with the intention of, I'm going to become this person. And keeping in mind, none of this was intentional at the time. Now, a lot of the things are very intentional, but it was very much, I want to be this person. I want to talk to people. I want to be able to just strike up a conversation with anyone. And that is exactly who I became. I would literally go somewhere and I was like, I could just start off a conversation. That, for me, being a very, very quiet person or child growing up, especially in sort of a little bit later in my childhood, was a huge thing for me. So those are some of the sort of things that are coming up in my mind that I had manifested. So I had tangible proof, but it wasn't something that, really, there wasn't something that I was able to fully replicate and make it stick. And other experiences, other things that I did before in terms of spiritual stuff was things that, because I wasn't very spiritual growing up, I was like, oh, this is all hocus pocus. Because again, I'd heard people around me saying that. So there was some kind of, I can't remember what it was, but there was some kind of workshop that my parents had sent me to, which was based around the law of attraction, around the secret principles. And it was all very good, but nothing really stuck. It wasn't sticking. It wasn't something that fully resonated. There's another workshop called Art of Living. This is a global organization, if you're familiar with it, but they had some meditation, and I did use it for a long time, but it wasn't something that fully woke me up to that consciousness. It was something I was like, oh, okay, fine. It was there. And basically, in essence, I was living from my neck up still. And a lot of these things just weren't, I was aware of them, but they weren't quite just hitting or creating that sort of shift or change. I don't know. I hope that makes sense. But it was kind of like I was still very much stuck up in my head, worrying about things, having all of these stories, and all of that. And then I obviously fast forward to, few years, and I had what is very commonly known as the dark night of the soul. When I tell you it was dark, it was very dark. It was probably one of the darkest periods of my time to date. And if you're not familiar with the dark night of the soul, this is where everything just feels literally dark. Like, it just feels like you're in a dark, stormy night. Nothing is getting better. You cannot see any glimmer of or a ray of sunshine, or in essence, by extension, hope, or anything around you. And it's just, you are in a space where you're so desperate, and you're so desperate to feel better that you would do anything. And I mean anything to feel better. just to feel even slightly better, for a lot of that discomfort and the pain to be alleviated just a little bit. So that is where I was. It was like everything was hitting the roof. Everything, you name it, and I was like, oh, I cannot. So so that was what I found out later. I think sometime last year was in or around the lead up or around my Saturn return, which I can do another episode on about that. But it's basically, it's astrologically related, and I wouldn't have believed any of these things before last year if someone had told me. But when I heard like just all of that being spoken about, and I started tracking it back to when I was going through all of this, I could not have made it up, even if I tried. So I'm a believer. Like, if the moon can cause the waves and patterns and shifts and high tide and low tide and all of that, we are part water as well. We're majority, like we're like 70-75% water as human beings. If the moon is having that kind of effect on our water bodies, how can we believe that it's not having that same effect on us? Anyways, I digress. So all of that to say, everything was crumbling, and I had never felt so alone in my life. But what it also did was it showed me who was in my corner. So I was able to take from it whatever I needed, which was the gratitude around, this is what has gone through. This is like coming to that acceptance of, this is what happened. There's nothing I can do about it to change it. And here's what it taught me. Here's the silver lining in the whole experience. And I'm so, so grateful for that. So I was in a place of just absolute, complete desperation. I was like, if someone was telling me to go and do something that I previously would not have agreed to, I was like, okay, fine, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to try it, because I was so open. And this is another thing, the beauty of, if you will, the kind of silver lining with the dark night of the soul or similar such experiences and things, is they break you open. They break your heart open. Where something was so closed, it breaks you open in a way that you've probably never experienced, and opens you up to different experiences, which I think is just so beautiful. Because without this, I would not have been on this path. I wouldn't be where I am right now today, living a life that I'm deeply grateful for, that I am creating very intentionally. So that's where, that's how I was feeling. And then once that happened, I had gone for somehow different things, kind of, the dots connected, and I end up at this particular meditation. It was a sound healing meditation. So now I got to that point. Now, what brought me to that point? If I'm tracking a little bit backwards now to connect the dots, here's how it went. I had the dark night of the soul, where everything was just dark, gloomy. I would do anything to get better and to feel better. And I went for a wedding where I was gifted a rose quartz crystal, manifestation as per The Secret and all of that. And so I attended this, and I was like, what is this crystal business? Do these things actually work? Because it's just a rock. That's what I'd been told growing up, and I hadn't necessarily always noticed the shifts. And because there was a time when crystals were so popular, they become the whole thing, and a whole sort of sensation. But there's always people misinterpreting things. There's always going to be fakes in the market, especially when something's becoming such a huge thing or a huge deal. So for me, it was always this is just a gimmick, and there's really none of this works. It's just a rock. So I didn't believe in the crystals, but I was curious. So I just kind of, asked how do I use it? What happens? What's up? And I was kind of just, told just go and look up cleansing, here's what you do. You start by cleansing it and programming it and all of that. So I was like, okay, fine, sounds complicated, but I'll look into it. And it took me months and months and months of putting it off until I finally, must have been about 6-7 months or something down the line at some point. And I finally got down to looking into cleansing the crystal. And it had just been sitting there, and it was just something I hadn't gotten around to. And this is where the reason I'm sharing all of this backstory is to show that we can always only connect the dots looking backwards, truly, because in the moment, we're not going to know. There's a lot of the times we can beat up ourselves about, oh my gosh, I should have done this sooner. I should have done this. We literally, like, we should all over ourselves. We could all over ourselves, and we put all of this pressure on ourselves, which is so unnecessary because everything is unfolding in perfect timing. Like, it is so divinely guided, like the way our journeys unfold, that they bring us to exactly where we're meant to be. So eventually I did start looking into it, and I was like, okay, fine, let's see what all of this is about. And I did. And I came across, all the different ways of cleansing the crystal. And I came across sound healing and sound baths at that time. And I looked them up on YouTube. And it was just the most beautiful sound. It sounded so familiar. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wish someone here were offering that, because I hadn't come across anyone doing any sound healing, sound meditations, sound baths, any of that. So I was like, okay, fine. And I guess the intention was there. So I carried on. I was like, okay, fine. You know what? I'm going to find my way to it at some point, maybe intentionally, like travel to somewhere that offers it, or look for it when I'm traveling or something. But I will, in the meantime, just enjoy it on YouTube. So that's what I did. And shortly after, I think it must have been about a week or two later, I'm guessing, I came across a post from someone offering a session here, which just turned out to be the very first one that they were doing. And at that time, and never again did this person post about these sessions ever again. I just happened to see it, and I got in touch and I acted on it. And I was so excited. I was like, I'm going to do it. And I went for it, and I went on to do 5 consecutive weeks in a row. And around that time, also, I developed insomnia. So I couldn't sleep. I was having deep anxiety around sleep, really bad anxiety, actually. And then, because I was working as well. So it's just this whole thing, like so much going on. And one night, some kind of feeling was like, let's just go and get the crystal that we've already charged, and cleansed and charged. And I think I'd already even put my intention in it. I can't remember. It was like, just get this crystal and sleep with it under my pillow. Okay, I'm just going to act on it. I don't know if that was the first time. I don't know if that was... maybe I thought about it a few times and I was like, oh my gosh, it's about time I try it. And so I did. And I literally just took the crystal. I took it, put it under my pillow. And I literally had the best night's sleep I had in a very long time at that point. And I slept through the night, which was a very, very difficult thing for me to do, because I would sleep for 2-3 hours and then I'd be awake and wouldn't be able to sleep until... Classic scenario, the alarm was probably going off in the morning, and that's when I'm just about starting to get to sleep. But at that point, it's time to go to work and start life and the day. So that's what happened. I woke up and I was like, wow, that was amazing. And again, you're probably going to hear me say this many times as I share the story. I could not have made it up even if I tried, honestly, because no one had told me that. So I just put it in and I was like, okay, I'm sold. Okay, I'm gonna, I guess these things are real. So I kept working with that and went on to accumulate a bunch of crystals afterwards. So now coming back to the sound healing. So I went for the first one and it was very interesting. I was like, oh, I love this. I love it so much. And I spoke to the facilitator and I had so many questions and he was so patiently answering everything. And he's like, you know what, do like 3 to 5 of these and you're going to notice the difference. Because the first one I think was me just being quite restless and he's like, there's a lot of excess energy that's just coming out. I was like, okay, fine, I'm sold. I'm going to try it again. I was desperate to feel better and that first session also just made me feel tons better. Like I was just incredible. I was so peaceful, so much more at ease. It was a whole vibe. So I went for the second one. It was nicer, it was better. I like noticed some kind of difference. Like, oh, I love it. And then I went for the third one. And the third session was where the magic happened. And that is where there's some noise in the background, so I hope that's not too distracting. But anyways, I was saying the third session is where the magic happened. And again, I did not know anything about any of this at all. I thought I was spiritual, but I clearly did not know what that meant. So up until that point, it always makes me laugh because I'm like, oh my goodness, that was literally the turning point for everything right now. And skipping timelines. Oh well. So I went to the third session and that third session was a full moon. It was around the full moon of that time. And he was like, okay, fine, it's a full moon. We're going to work with those energies and they're so powerful. And I was still learning about these things, you know, especially with the crystal that I'd just gotten earlier, some months prior. So I was just kind of learning. It's like, oh, okay, fine, what happens? And, you know, this is what it is. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. You know, that it's powerful and it's great for cleansing and releasing and all of that. So I was like, okay, fine, perfect. And that particular session, he was taking us through a chakra cleanse, starting from the root up. So I was like, wonderful, let's do this. And I was particularly not, like, I wasn't getting into the session as easily as I had in the previous one. I was pretty, like, still awake. I was still very much not dropping down into my body and just into that relaxed state. I was a bit fidgety. But I was like, okay, I'm just going to go with it. Like, you know, I'm just going to trust that, and not really knowing what trust the process was either at that point. And you're like, okay, fine. Yeah, it's really cool. It's really nice. Like, I'm just here. I'll take what I get. And then he reached the third eye chakra. So all of the other ones he's done. He's passed the throat. He's passed, like, obviously all of them. And gets to the third eye. And literally, wow, that was a roller coaster ride. It was incredible in some way, but also it was a very new experience for me. And I was just in awe afterwards. Like, every time I think about it, I was like, wow. As soon as he just went clang on the sand bowl, it was like, literally, when I say roller coaster, I was literally like a roller coaster ride. It was like there was some hooded figures or something, I'm not really sure. It was some kind of something that grabbed me and it was just like, took me up. I was flying, but I was on a roller coaster. And it's a very strange thing to describe, but that's kind of how I saw it. And I'm a very visual person, so sometimes I just get these images. That's the visual that I saw and even what I experienced. And then I was kind of somewhere in between, and I met my grandparents and I had a whole conversation with them, and it was so nice to see them again. And because I'd lost them when I was quite young, and it was one of my earliest defining memories that I have as a child. So that in itself was very, very healing for me. And if you haven't already guessed, this was an astral projection. didn't know about these things. So after a while, like all of this had happened, it felt like it was hours and hours and hours. I honestly have no idea how long it must have been. Probably not too long if it was already on the third eye. But it felt like ages. And then it was like I was being sent back and I was like, I don't want to go. This is so nice. Like, I just want to stay here. I don't want to go back to life. So the spirit, the hooded figure, whatever it was that had taken me there, literally just snatched me back, like brought me back, right back into my body, just as the facilitator was bringing us back and closing out the session. Like he was just finishing out the sound bath. And I was just, what? Wow. But I clearly made all of that up. And so I didn't share my session afterward, like my experience afterwards, because I just thought I was crazy. I was making it all up. Like, who would even, like, whatever. It's probably all just in my mind, you know. But it started a healing process that I wasn't aware of at the time. And it was so wild. Like, that day onwards, from the moment that I left that room after the session and I was on my way home, I started seeing all these angel numbers. Okay, that's it from me for now, and I will see you in the next episode. Until then, if you loved what you heard, please consider leaving me a 5-star review, take a screenshot of the episode and share it to your Instagram stories, and don't forget to tag me at The Optimistic Agenda. And did I forget to mention, if you want to dive in deeper, you can come and work with me one-on-one. Just drop me a DM on Instagram or send me an email on theoptimisticagenda@gmail.com. Or if you want to get a feel of my work and see what I'm all about and you want to kind of get your feet wet, then you can go and get my Radical Self-Love Workbook on etsy.com/shop/theoptimisticagenda. I will leave the link in the show notes. And I'm constantly adding new offers. So if we're not already connected, come and join me on Instagram at The Optimistic Agenda for all of the updates and more juicy goodness. And please feel free to shoot me a DM and say hi. I always love hearing from you. Remember, you are so much more powerful than you were made to believe.